I am Dr. Om Prakash. The title of my lecture is Historical Account of Social Legislation in India. The prime purpose of this lecture is to elaborate several social evils and practice prevailing in India, also to discuss social legislations which were enacted during colonial and post-colonial India to eradicate these social evils, and also to observe how far these legislations were able to address the problems. These are the prime objectives. India is the oldest surviving civilization in the world. This is the land where the notion of dharma or rule of law flourished since millennium. Most of the ancient legislations are recorded into Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras. The most significant among them are Gautam and Bodhayan Dharma Sutra, Manu Smriti, Yagbalk Smriti, Narada Smriti, Brihaspati Smriti, etc. Manu is known as the first lawgiver of India. The first codification of law was done by him. The Vedas, the two epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and Arthashastra of Kautilya are also full of these legislations and norms to govern the society. In the medieval time, during Mughal period, Emperor Akbar took certain measures for these various legislations to remove social tensions from the Indian society and purge the existing social evil such as abolition of jizya tax, discouragement to child marriage, encouraged widow remarriage, restrictions on infanticide and prohibited sati system, and also abolished slave trade and abolished the practice of converting the prisoners of war into Islam. By the time the British came to India, the socio-economic condition of women folk was pitiable. Several evil practices such as the practice of sati, the parda system, child marriage, female infanticide, bride price, devdasi system and polygamy had made their life miserable. The place of women was confined to the four walls of her house. The doors of education had been shut for them. Economically, also, her status was miserable. There was no social and economic equality between a man and a woman. A Hindu woman was not entitled to inherit any property. She was completely dependent on man. During the 19th and 20th century, some laws were enacted with the sincere efforts of social reformers, humanists, and some British administrators to improve the condition of women in Indian society. Now let us talk about the concept and objective of social legislation. Social legislations are the laws primarily to protect the weak, unemployed, women, children, disabled, elderly, and other such vulnerable sections of the society. Social legislation aims to restrain the behavior of the individual and groups in the social structure due to the selfish motives and individualistic tendencies of the men. They tend to clash with others for the sake of gains. Legislations tend to coerce the citizens to avoid clash with their fellow citizens. The fear of punishment can act effective deterrent against any unruly and violent behavior. It can ensure harmony in the social system and can provide opportunities to the citizens for fair play. India, being a welfare state, aims to ensure the fundamental rights and basic human rights to every member of the nation. The prime objective of social legislations are to provide better quality of life and to address various social problems like juvenile delinquency, child labor, infanticide, feticide, widow burning, etc. Now we can see the social legislation in modern India, especially during the British period, the way it has developed. The British, due to their mercantilist interest, had no interest in the reforming Indian society. They had the fear that any interference in the matter of custom and religious issue may hamper their economic interest. So they followed a policy of indifference and caution in the social issues. However, they were the great critic of Indian custom and tradition and wished to create an ideological hegemony on the Indian mind that Christian civilization of the Occident is superior to the Orient in so such theories were the theory of civilizing mission, white man's burden, and Oriental despotism. And through these theories, they justified their illegal rule over India. The rise of social and religious movements in post 1857 draw the attention of the British administration towards the existing social evils. The propaganda carried out by the Christian missionaries also stirred the minds of the educated Indians. Western thought and education and views expressed in different newspapers and magazines had their own impact. Some of the British administrators, like Lord William Bentinck, who was influenced by liberalism, had taken personal interest in the matter. There were primarily two areas in which laws were enacted: laws pertaining to women emancipation and related to caste system. So now we will see first the first legislation for the abolition of sati. Burning widows on the funeral pyre of the deceased is an age-old practice in India. It was more prevalent among the ruling class, but later on it became a general practice. A campaign against sati was undertaken by missionaries like William Carey and William Wilberforce to increase missionary activity in India. Raja Ram Mohan Roy's Brahma Samaj also spearheaded the campaign against sati. Ram Mohan Roy took the Shastric prohibitions of sati from Parasar Samhita. He developed arguments and created campaign for the abolition of the sati. The British initially tried to regulate sati. William Bentinck was alarmed by the rise of the sati cases. The records of the company account for more than 8,000 deaths attributed to sati from 1813 to 1828. William Bentinck adopted a cautious approach. He surveyed society on three issues: whether the army would revolt, whether legislation was available, and whether Hindu resistance could be contained. When he got convinced that army would cause no problem, then Bentinck passed the sati regulation of 1829. The regulation was unequivocal in the condemnation of sati, declaring the practice of sati or burning of widows illegal and punishable. It made zamindars, petty land owners, local agents, and officers in charge of revenue collection accountable for immediate communication to the officers of their nearest police station of any intended sacrifice of the nature described. In case of willful neglect, the responsible officer was liable to a fine of Rs 200 or 6 months in jail for default. The ban was challenged in the courts and matter went to the Privy Council, but Privy Council also upheld this decision in 1832. Other company territories also banned it shortly after. Sati remained legal in some princely estates. Jaipur was the last such state to ban the practice of sati in 1846. In September 1997, Roop Kaur became sati on the funeral pyre of her husband, Deorala village of Sikar district in Rajasthan. The incident shocked the country. In October, the state government promulgated the Rajasthan Sati Prevention Ordinance 1987. Due to widespread demand, both houses of the Indian Parliament passed the Commission of Sati Prevention Bill 1987, which made any attempt to commit abet or glorify sati punishable. Next legislation is legislation against infanticide. Female infanticide was another inhuman practice affecting the 19th century Indian society. It was particularly in vogue in Rajputana, Punjab, and northwestern provinces. Colonel Todd, Johnson Duncan, Malcolm, and other British administrators have discussed about this evil custom in detail. There were several reasons responsible for this practice, such as family pride, the fear of not finding a suitable match for the girl child, etc. Therefore, immediately after birth, the female infants were being killed either by feeding them with opium or by strangulating or by purposely neglecting them. Some laws were enacted against this practice in 1795, 1802, 4, and in 1870. The Female Infanticide Prevention Act 1870 made the killing of girl child punishable. It authorized the police to maintain the register for the birth and death of infants. The act had the provision of a prison sentence of 6 months and a fine of Rs 30,000 for violation of or disobeying the act. Section 6 of this act empowers the police to take away the female child from its parents if it is noticed that the child is being ignored or endangered. However, the practice could not be completely eradicated. Today, there are states like Haryana, Delhi, and Chandigarh which are poor regarding the male-female ratio. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao slogan by Narendra Modi government is a welcome move. There is a need of increased awareness to save the vanishing daughters. The next legislation is the legislations for the widow remarriage. Widow remarriage was widely prevalent in ancient India. In course of time, due to increasing rigidity, the practice was discontinued. By the first half of 19th century, there were lakhs of widows leading a life of solitude, neglect, and social anathema. Social reformers took the cause of widows and popularized widow remarriage by writing in newspapers and contemporary journals. Prominent among those reformers were Rajaram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. They carried out large-scale campaign in this regard, mainly through books, pamphlets, and petitions. Vidyasagar, in fact, researched through the Vedic text and find out that Vedas sanction widow remarriage. He discovered that the Vedic women enjoyed more rights and privileges. In 1856, the legislature passed Widow Remarriage Act 1856. The next legislation is the legislation against child marriage. The practice of child marriage was another social stigma for the women. In 1846, the minimum marriageable age for a girl was only 10 years. Due to the efforts of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the Act of 1860 was passed, raising the age of consent for married and unmarried girls to 10. In November 1870, the Reform association was started with the efforts of Kesab Chandra Sen, which vigorously campaigned against the child marriage. A journal called Mahapap Bal Vivah was also launched with the efforts of B.M. Malabari, who was a Parsi from Bombay and a journalist by profession, and he fought against the child marriage. In 1891, through the enactment of the Age of Consent Act, marriageable age was raised to 12 years. The punishment for the violation of this act was equal to rape. It received support from the Indian social reformers like B.M. Malabari, Pandit Ramabai, and several women's organizations. The bill was opposed by several orthodox Hindu leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak on the charge of interference in the Hindu faith and religion. In 1929, Child Marriage Restraint Act was passed, which is also known as Sarda Act, by which the marriageable age of the girl was raised to 14 years and for boys it was raised to 18 years. This act is called Sarda Act because the judge Harbilas Sarda played a very important role in the passing of this act. Several women's organizations like All India Women's Conference, Women's Indian Association campaigned for passing the act. This was the first act where women fought and worked in an organized way to get the bill passed. They were determined not to guide by the ancient laws, which shows their zest for modernity, and it also brought the liberal feminism to the forefront. Even today, there are some parts of the country, like Rajasthan, where we can witness the occurrence of mass child marriages. Another important problem was the problem of Parda system. Voices were raised against the practice of Parda during the 19th century and also in the 20th century. The condition of women among the peasantry was relatively better in this respect. Parda was widely prevalent in North India. In southern part, this tradition was almost absent. The Indian freedom struggle brought the women folk from the four walls of their house and gave a jolt to the Parda system. Mahatma Gandhi wrote, "The sight of the screen made me sad. It pained and humiliated me deeply. Let us not lie with one limb completely or partially paralyzed. Let us tear down the Parda in one mighty effort." However, no specific legislations were framed to abolish the system. The system still continues in large part of the country, especially in North India. The next important issue is related to the caste and untouchability. The system of caste had become the bane of Indian society. The caste system was primarily based on the fourfold division of society: Bij, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras. On account of their degradation in their social status, the Sudras were subject to all kinds of social discrimination. In the beginning of the 19th century, the caste of India had been split into innumerable subcastes on the basis of birth. Raja Ram Mohan Roy invoked the authority of Mahanirvana Tantra, an old religious sociological work of Hinduism, to support his view that caste should no longer continue. Brahma Samaj opposed to rigid social divisions and implied there cannot be a surer truth than this, that high destiny cannot be fulfilled without the utter destruction of the supreme root of all our social evils, the caste system. The Caste Disabilities Removal Act 1850 was passed by the government. of Lord Dalhousie. It ensures that any Indian converting to Christianity is not deprived of the right of inheritance. Abolition of untouchability became a major issue of the 19th century social and religious reform movements in the country. Mahatma Gandhi made the removal of untouchability a part of his constructive program. He brought out a paper, the Harijan, and also organized the Harijan Sevak Sangh, having its headquarters at Delhi. Gandhi declared, untouchability is a crime against God and man. Bhimrao Ambedkar dedicated his life for the welfare of the downtrodden. In Bombay, he formed a Bahiskrit Hitkarni Sabha in 1924 for this purpose. Later, he also organized the Akhil Bharatiya Dalit Varg Sabha to fight against caste oppression. Jyotiba Phule in Western India and Sri Narayan Guru in Kerala, respectively, established the Satya Sodhak Samaj and Sri Narayan Dharm Paripalam Yogam to include self-esteem among the downtrodden in the Madras Presidency. Also, the beginning of 20th century witnessed the rise of self-respect movement of A.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, alias Periyar. In order to eradicate this evil practice, many other individual and institutional efforts were also made. These movements were directed mainly in removing the disabilities suffered by Harijans in regard to drawing of water from public wells, getting entry into temples, and admission into schools. After independence, Article 17 of the Indian Constitution made practice of untouchability in any form illegal. This is one of the few fundamental rights against individuals. In order to further weaken the practice, the Indian Parliament in 1955 passed Untouchability Offence Act. This act was further amended and renamed in 1976 Protection of Civil Rights Act, and it made provision of fine and imprisonment in case of denial of basic rights to the concerned groups. The next problem was related to the Devdasi system. Devdasi system flourished in India since ancient time. They used to get patronage from the rulers. However, during British period, several social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Govind Ranade, and Muthu Lakshmi Reddy considered it evil, since it leads to temple prostitution. However, only after 1880, a strong group of reformers and educated middle class, such as doctors, journalists, administrators, and social workers, advocated for the abolition of the Dasi system and dedication ceremony of the girls to the temple deity. They created a public campaign by organizing academic gatherings such as conferences and seminars. There was a rise of venereal diseases in the last decade of the 19th century in India, mostly among the soldiers. Since the Devdasis were educated or equated with prostitutes, the British government passed the order for the registration of all prostitutes, including Devdasis. However, revivalists like Theosophists advocated for the practice of Devdasi and considered their dance as manifestation of divine. The Bombay Devdasi Protection Act 1934 made dedication of girls to temple illegal and sanctioned the provisions that marriage of such girls are legal and children born from such marriage were to be treated as legitimate. Those found involved into forcing the girl into dedication were to face an imprisonment of 1 year and a fine or both. After independence, the Madras Devdasi Prevention of Dedication Act 1947 declared the Devdasi system illegal. In Madras Presidency, subsequently, the Karnataka Devdasi Prohibition of Dedication Act 1982 was passed. Andhra Pradesh Devdasi Prohibition Dedication Act 1989 was passed, and Goa also passed Children's Act 2003 to abolish the system of Devdasi from India. The next legislation was the legislation against slavery. The slave system in India was quite different in compared to Roman and Greek tradition, where slaves were treated, bought and sold like commodities. The Greek traveler Megasthenes, who visited India during Chandragupta Maurya, could not notice the presence of slaves in India because slaves in India were mostly acted as domestic servant and they were treated well, unlike the slaves in the West. Slavery was banned in the British Empire in 1833 and it was said that after 10 years in 1843 the slavery was also declared illegal in India. This led to the slave emancipation without paying any compensation to the slaves' owners. The Penal Code of 1860 also made slavery illegal. However, the actual practice of slavery continued. It had a visual impact on the export and import of slaves, but agricultural slavery remained intact. Now, in the end, I would like to summarize whatever all we discussed. Social legislations in India have a long history. Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras were the earliest treatises containing the social legislations and norms to deal with civil and criminal cases. In medieval India, Akbar took keen interest to prevent social evils like sati, infanticide, child marriage, and slave trade. The government of Lord William Bentinck passed the famous Sati Resolution of 1829 banning sati. The efforts of Raja Ram Mohan Rai and several other reformers were equally memorable in this regard. The Female Infanticide Prevention Act 1870 made the killing of girl child punishable. It authorized the police to maintain the register for the birth and death of babies. By Act 5 of 1843, slavery was declared illegal in India. This led to the slave emancipation without paying any compensation to the slave owners. The Bombay Devdasi Protection Act 1934 made dedication of girls to temple illegal. The Madras Devdasi Prevention of Dedication Act 1947 declared the Devdasi system illegal in Madras Presidency. The Caste Disabilities Removal Act 1950 was passed by the government of Lord Dalhousie. It ensured that any Indian converting to Christianity is not deprived of his right of inheritance. In 1891, through the enactment of the Age of Consent Act, marriageable age of girls were raised to 12 years. The punishment for the violation of this act was equal to rape. In 1929, the Child Marriage Restraint Act or Sharda Act was passed. Through this act, the minimum age of marriage of girls was raised to 14 years. Act 5 of 1843 declared slavery illegal in India. However, its practice still continues in some form. Thank you.